Hello, Jelly Babies, and welcome back to the To Be Social podcast. And we are here today at the KEF Experience Centre in London with the amazing Sarah Yule. Please say hello to our guests.
Hello, everybody.
There we go. Kieran, obviously, in the hot seat over there. And today we're going to have a conversation with Sarah all about her journey into the audio industry and how we interact with different elements of that. And yeah, we're going to just jump straight in. How did you get started in audio? What was the journey? What was the path? Where did you get the idea from?
I think initially it actually started by realising I was a little bit rubbish at being a musician. To be honest, I think there's a lot of people working in audio that still want to be a musician. And I think I realised early on, I love music. I wish I could sing and dance like Michael Jackson. I wish I could, play an instrument, but I'm actually just not very good. And as you can probably tell, I was really shy as well. So
what was your instrument, or did you sing?
I used to play the flute.
Oh, wow, okay.
Which
Ron Burgundy.
Well, this is it. I did not play the flute like I wanted to even play the flute. But I think what was good...
You did? So what? Hang on a minute. Yeah, I got to unpack that. So you wanted to play the flute in a certain way, but you didn't play it.
Do you know what it is, right? So you start learning an instrument. So I started learning. I lived in London, and the school I went to was this amazing school in Islington, and the teachers were all like people in the industry. So our flute teacher was actually part of like the London Symphonic Orchestra.
Wow.
So he wasn't there all the time, but when he did come, he was like really inspirational and just made you want to play. So, we'd start playing some really interesting pieces and you start getting quite into it, and it starts off on the classical thing and you learn about James Galway and all of these sorts of things. But then you see like a jazz musician playing flute, right? That's not using any music in the way that they make it sound. And you're like playing Greensleeves thinking, I need to reassess my life, But I really enjoyed it. Like I enjoyed doing it. I realised that I was quite nervous around it, but I was always kind of the kid with like my headphones on, with my Walkman, listening to a lot of Michael Jackson. But my mum was a big record collector as well. She had a lot of friends that were in bands and stuff. So there was always music around us. Just none of us were very musical. We weren't a big musical family. We just loved it. And I just loved the arts. I mean, I was a little bit of a kind of, I don't know, a bit of a hippie kid. I was a bit like, skipping through the daisies, and I loved the arts. But actually, when it came to academia, I was a nerd. Like, I can't lie. Like, my favourite subjects were maths. I loved science, and I just wasn't that good at art. I just loved it. So I think I was about 15, and we were trying to work out what we were going to do for our work experience when we were having all of these careers things at school. And there was a thing, I can't remember how I came across it, but there was this thing from the BBC about jobs at the BBC. I remember looking through it and I came across this role, sound engineer. I was like, that sounds interesting. And so I started to read into it and I was like, oh, wow. So I could be around music and be around audio. I don't have to play anything and I can be a nerd. This sounds perfect for me. So my mum, with her kind of connections with bands, hooked me up to do my work experience when I was 15 down in Brighton at the Levelers recording studios.
Wow.
So went down there, stayed with one of her hippie mates for a couple of weeks and was accommodated by a lovely guy called Danny, who was the house engineer at the time. And I helped with the fan club and I helped in the office and I helped kind of set up cables and mics and stuff and all of that thing. And I was hooked. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. So I worked 3 jobs the next summer. So I used to work factories, out in fields, waitressing, all sorts to save up money. And then I did a private course in a studio and started to go to Bedford College to do City and Guilds sound engineering and do my A-levels in music and physics. And then it was like, yeah, that's what I want to do.
Wow.
So the journey started with the Levelers.
The Levelers, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I guess.
That is very cool.
It is. Well, as a work experience opportunity, that's...
I mean, I'm showing my age now, but they were pretty big in the 90s, right?
Levelers are cool.
Yeah, they're cool.
They're still going.
They're cool. They are still
They're
going.
Still touring.
I need to go and see them, actually.
And I can't remember, they've got a live sound engineer and I've spoken to her many, 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 many times and I cannot think of the if you're the sound engineer for the Levelers, get in touch because I cannot remember your name and I really apologise. But a really lovely lady who's been with them for years as well. So after the Levelers, you studied at Bedford College. What was your first professional step in after you graduated?
So after graduating, I ended up going to LIPA and doing sound tech up in Liverpool. So yeah, through that, I'd started to do various different projects, freelance with different people around the city. There was quite a lot. There's always quite a cultural city, so there's a lot going on there. But then I guess it started to go down different routes. So I had a few things going on. So I actually started a club night when I was living there. So I used to run a monthly drum and bass night in Liverpool called Surreal. So we used to do a monthly Saturday at the Barfly, which was the Mask then on Seal Street in Liverpool city centre. So I was kind of still doing a few promotion stuff. And then
Just going to interject question for you.
Yeah.
Is Liverpool your favourite city in the country?
Do you know what? It's one of my favourite cities.
I have Liverpool down as my favourite city in the country. Yeah,
you're absolute number one.
Yeah, anywhere that I go, I always reference back to Liverpool as being probably one of the best.
Do you know
best
what?
Places.
It's one of the best places ever. Do you know what? It's the people that make it.
It is.
It's a city that feels, in some ways, like a little town. Like it feels supportive. It's friendly, and the sense of humour is just amazing. But you know, it's a city that made me feel very welcome as my home. Like right from the first time, I remember going up for my university interview, and my mum came with me. It was a big thing. I didn't have a lot of money at that time, so like paying for a train ticket to go to these places was like a big adventure. And I remember us going into the local pub and like really meekly asking, like, do you serve food in here? And them going, oh no, sorry, we don't, you know, but there's a great chippy next door. You know, if you want anything, just grab it and bring it in. It's like, oh, okay. Like, could we get 2 half pints of lager? And them just being like, just ask for a pint and 2 glasses, love, it's cheaper. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, bloody love this city already, right? You know,
it's
and
full of
just,
realness.
It's just like just down to earth and like always just felt welcome. So yeah, I've still got good mates there, but I digress, don't I? So, yeah, it was kind of doing some stuff around the city and doing some engineering. But I actually had my eldest son while I was still at uni. So, I finished my second year at uni, 37 weeks pregnant, and went back in my final year when he was 7 weeks old, and then graduated 3 days before his first birthday.
That's commitment. Absolutely.
It's
good timing,
amazing.
I think.
That is incredible.
But so I didn't really know any different to kind of doing that. But what I quickly realised was, although for me it hadn't really changed my goals or my world perspective in terms of what I wanted to do, what I realised was actually the world I want to go into doesn't really fit with this, because nursery hours don't match studio hours. The studio world doesn't get someone that's got a baby or needs to kind of pump some milk to feed in the middle of a session or something. It's kind of, you know. So I was like, okay, this isn't really going to work for me. So, you know, at that time, the measure of a freelance engineer was if you had a Pro Tools rig, right? Pro Tools HD rig, and then you can be a freelance engineer. So I was like, I need to get a Pro Tools HD rig. Like, whew, it's quite expensive, isn't it? Pro Tools HD rig. So I was like, I need to get a normal job for a little bit to save up so I can go freelance. So I was looking at the notice board at uni in Lipper, and there was an advert saying, you know, new music instrument retailer looking for sales staff. And that was Dolphin Music that had not long moved to Speak from when they were doing it out their house. And I became their first salesperson. So I was like answering the phones, doing the emails, sending out the quotes, kind of specking up different things for various jobs, but also updating the website and also ringing all the suppliers. So I started to get to know there was a whole industry behind the industry that I'd wanted to get into. And I guess I'd always wanted to be that creative. And I saw myself, I identified as a creative nerd, right? But what I hadn't really ever given myself credit for was that I actually really enjoyed the business and entrepreneurial side of things and the commercial side of things. Like I was naturally quite commercially minded, I think. So actually when I started to get into that more sales role and closing deals and doing stuff, I really enjoyed it.
You got the bug.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. But still at that point, not enough to kind of be like, this is what I want to do. I still saw that very much as a temporary measure. And let's be fair, like, you know, they were a startup retailer. I was a grad. You know, the pay was terrible. It wasn't like a sustainable career move at that time. It was like, I think, you know, I'll be real with you. You know, I was, 21, 22. And I think my take-home pay after tax was 870 quid, and my nursery fees were £625 a month. So you can do the math and realise that I was getting into a bit of a state with that, and it had to change. So I was relying on doing some freelance stuff just to pay the bills, to be honest. I did kind of a year there, and the business was going like that. I mean, it was literally doubling pretty much every month in terms of the turnover, because it was still kind of the .com boom. And I was like, I need to get out of here. So I'd been looking into other things, and ended up leaving Dolphin, and I was going to go to Granada TV and go into post-production, because I thought at least it's a big company, there'll be a bit more understanding about childcare, and then, it's not music, but it's still audio, and maybe, I can find a way back. I'd been talking to a guy called Tony Larking, because TL Audio was one of the brands that we sold at Dolphin, and we had them in the studio. So the little C1 compressor in the classic series had been my go-to when I was tracking in the studio. And he was based in Letchworth. I was like, I used to live in Letchworth, Archer's Way, I used to live there in Letchworth. And he's like, well, next time you're down in the area, visiting friends or family, it's like, pop in for a cup of tea. So I was like, I'm actually down this weekend. He's like, oh, wicked, pop by. So I got my friend to drive me over to Norton Mill in Norton, where Tony was based, and popped in for a cup of tea, and basically we ended up being there all day. And he was like, I'm looking for someone. Would you want to come and work with me? And in the beginning, I said no. I said, to be honest, I've got a 2-year-old. I'm in Liverpool. I'm broke. I can't relocate. I'm just not in the position to relocate right now. And I owe so much to Tony, because he was like, do you know what? You were our best salesperson. Like, Dolphin went from being like nowhere to better than turnkey for us in terms of sales. He's like, I want you to work for us. I'll set you up with a home office. As long as you can get down to here once a month for a meeting, he's like, you can work remotely. And
what year would that have been?
That was 2005.
So that's pretty rare, isn't it? I mean, it's commonplace now, isn't it? But that, having someone believe in you that much, that must have been amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, I was like a young 20-something female in this industry, and back then there wasn't really any I didn't meet any at that time of women in terms of sales reps or other companies or whatever. I mean, so I joined in July 2005, and then the first trade show that we did was Plaza, which used to be at Earl's Court then, in like the September. And I remember
part of the Elect Club.
Well, I remember the first booth, and I won't say which brand it was, but the first booth we went over, Tony was like, oh, hiya, la, la, la. I wanted you to meet Sarah. And they walked up to me and they were just like, so are you Tony's girlfriend or his PA?
Really?
And I was like, I'm his new sales manager, actually. What's your name? But it was like, you immediately got kind of the vibe of things. But no, he did put a lot of faith in me. And I think because it was a small company, it was the perfect first step as well, because, they were still manufacturing in the UK. So you got to see kind of everything from design through to, manufacture and all elements of the business. So, going through all of the finance stuff, going through the sales, the marketing. And Tony didn't really like traveling much then. So, if we were doing a trade show, then it was me flying to wherever, setting everything up, getting my screwdriver out, unboxing pallets, setting things up, doing all of that. So it was great. It was great training. And it worked really nice. So I was there for sort of 5 years. And it was kind of the beginning of me going, I want to be in the industry side of things. Like that's what seems to be wrong. And I've realised as I've said that was 19 years ago, which is terrifying.
Time flies. We've been having fun, clearly. So, I mean, it's such a great,
that's mega, isn't it?
Like, introduction to you and how you sort of made those steps through, and then adding being a mother into that as well, and all of the different elements that come through. So, in moving from sort of sales of the product on the coalface of a retailer to the manufacturing, what were the biggest differences that you noticed there?
For me, I think it felt much more authentic to me, because I think that kind of the creative nerd persona that I aspired to identify to, it felt much more creative, because you're there from kind of, you understand all of the why behind the product, like why that's been created. You understand all the detail that's gone into it, and it's kind of much more of a solution. So I think moving from kind of retail, which is always by nature just very transactional, it feels kind of less authentic. It wasn't really for me. Like, it was kind of fine, and it's nice when you hit your target and kind of whatever. But I think going more manufacturer side and really being involved in the product side of things as well.
Did you have influence into new product development as well?
So when I joined, we were just launching the M4 tube tracker, I think. And we had the Ivory series and the Classic series, and they discontinued a few of the other ones by then. So while I was there, it was everything from, like, we brought back the Fat Man series in hardware, and we did some other products. We diversified a bit, but things I was really involved in, like my conceptual idea that I brought to market was a product called the Fat Track. And it was like a little 19-inch rack mountable wedge mixer where you had, and it was before this was like a thing, but it had 2 input channels, which were channel strips from like our mixing console, simplified, a nice sweatband mid EQ. It was a little summing mixer and a little monitoring station where you could switch between different headphones and different loudspeakers. And you had a little kind of modular patching at the top, so you could kind of patch everything into everything. And it was designed for kind of, I was noticing more and more people I know were mixing more in the box, but they still wanted some channel strips. This was way before people were just bringing out the little channel strips and that. But I was like, what they want is they want something that still looks like I'm a studio, but something that's a bit more flexible. And people were just starting to get into the idea of, how can I warm up a mix which is in the box? And people were saying, oh yeah, bring it out and mix it down in analog, or bring out some stems. So that was the idea of this. It was like tracking, summing, monitoring all in one box where you could kind of do everything. And then I worked with a guy who develops kind of ADDA. So we did. We used to have a DO8, which was
just
like an ADAT interface.
People that aren't so technically minded, just explain the acronym.
Oh, okay. So analog to digital converters, basically. So if I've got if I'm trying to turn something from a voltage into a binary, then it's kind of a chip set which helps convert it.
There you go.
Basically, for connectivity, instead of just analog, we wanted it to fit into other things. So at the time, kind of ADAT was still a thing. So we had an ADAT port, but I worked to create a Firewire port. And I mean, this is not like your slick kind of interfaces of later year, because it was attached by a ribbon cable inside, and you had to like get screwdrivers to like unscrew it and slot it in. But it was basically a Firewire interface using the same converters which were on like the Lynx Aurora at the time, if you remember that sound card. It was like a quite popular one back in the day, but really good high-end one. And you could do what was it? It was 4x12 basically channels, which was a really high channel count in that day and age, and that enabled you to kind of do everything kind of on here, but combined with the box. So that was quite a good product, and that was really good fun. And then I also was involved in another series, because it was all valve stuff. One of the biggest things I used to hear from people is like, I don't always want valves, and especially like in some parts of the signal chain, it's all right maybe on a preamp, but I don't really want to mix down and have valves. So developed a discrete Class A series where there was a valve stage, but you could completely bypass it. It was like a true bypass where it would completely switch out of the circuitry. So if you wanted it pure signal path, no valve, you could. And then to make the valve stage easier, it was just kind of a saturation knob, so a little bit more old school, kind of lean back to sort of the 70s style product. And that was the Ebony series. So we did a channel strip, compressor, EQ on the Ebony series. And then one of the funniest product launches I did, so because I was quite noticing on the Fat Track, everyone was loving the summing side of things. So I was like, we should do a summing mixer. So because a lot of people were saying on the way out, they don't always want the valve stage, I was like, we should do the summing mixer in the Ebony series. So there used to be a show in London called Limbs. Do you remember Limbs show? So it was like I think it was in Excel. So no, they all start to merge into one. But I did like a press launch there for this new product, and I thought, because it was summertime, it was like July or something. So I had these t-shirts saying, British summers just got better, because we're a British company. It's a summing mixer, and I had like strawberries and cream sweets and champagne and stuff. But the product was called the Ebony Summer. Now, little did I know, in my pure innocence, that Ebony Summer was the name of a roly-poly porn star. So it was quickly renamed to the A4 Summing Mixer. So, I mean, it sometimes in life you learn things in a way that you don't want to repeat.
Yep.
But, I will now always Google the names of things before I
at
even
that
think
trade show.
about it.
Were you introduced to that?
I was. It was. You know.
That's incredible.
I mean, obviously, journalists usually have the reputation of being quite subtle, but I think after a few glasses of champagne, one of them energetically, enthusiastically informed me of the situation that I'd got myself into with the particular naming of this product. So,
love it.
Yeah.
But you sold some, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I did.
There
yeah.
you go.
I think some people were a little bit disappointed, but most people were happy.
This wasn't quite what we was expecting in the box, but that's great.
That's why it should be now.
And why not? So, I mean, that little sort of section there for me is really fascinating, just to hear that transition from sort of student to product development, sales, and marketing all in the same thing. So how did you know, in terms of, you've mentioned that you really enjoyed the entrepreneurship. How was that featured later on in your sort of career as well now? So your current role, does that entrepreneurship element take quite a strong...
Yeah, I think it naturally takes a role throughout everything I do, but in different ways. I think it's kind of the spirit of kind of how you can approach something. So I think one of the things when you're trying to be entrepreneurial, you're trying to get an idea off the ground, is like, by any means necessary, we're going to try and make this work. So there's a certain sort of resilience and determination. And I've said to people before that it's kind of like my mantra with things is, you know, failure is not an option. But I think it gets misinterpreted because, like, I definitely feel like there's points in my life where it's like, well, failure is not an option right now. Like, I've got bills to pay, I've got kids to feed, I've got stuff to do. Yeah. Like, I have to make this work. Failure is not an option. But at the same time, I think when you're taking an entrepreneurial approach to things, it's like, actually, that means you're going to fail 1,000 times.
Yeah. But you learn from it all.
But you learn from it and you keep going. So it's kind of, failure's not an option. It's like, you don't give up, you find a way. But it's all related back, I think, to kind of that more creative nerd, because in audio installations, right, if something's gone wrong, say you've done a setup and it's not working, you don't just throw the towel in straight away and go, oh, sorry, it's not working.
Yeah, I do. I throw it in and call Dave.
I do. But normally it's kind of like you know, to the point where it can drive you insane sometimes. You want to test every single iteration of what's going on to try and track down the issue, because you know it will work. It will work.
What
but
would be your definition
here
of failure, though? That's for me has always been, you know, people use that statement, but how do you define failure? Because it's so different to each individual.
I think failure takes so many different identities and iterations. I think for me, when it hurts most for me is when I feel that I've completely misjudged something. So like, I've failed because I've completely misunderstood the brief, or I've misunderstood the expectations. I'm trying to think of an example, but I think I don't really carry things with me. Like, I'm one of these people that I can be so mad with you right now, and by 7 o'clock I'll be like fine again. Like, I don't really hold long-term grudges. It depends, though.
You've already got my number.
It depends. But yeah, I mean, I try not to. I think it's so easy for us to beat ourselves up about things again and again and live in our failures, because everyone makes mistakes all the time. Like, we're ridiculous. We're all ridiculous. We do ridiculous things. We say ridiculous things. We make mistakes. We fail all the time. And you can either live with that, or you can just kind of, you know, brush off. I think the thing is just admitting and knowing that you don't get it right. Sometimes it happens, right? It happens. And you can't control what happens to you sometimes in life. Sometimes, no matter how hard you try, no matter what you do, no matter how well you try and prepare yourself, situations will occur where you will fail. Now, you couldn't maybe change that. You might beat yourself up of, what could I have done differently? What could I have said differently? Why didn't I see this coming? Why? But at the end of the day, you can't change it. All that you have control of, your power is how you react to it. That's completely your control. And I think that's something that I've learned over the years, is like, that's how I can feel powerful, is by empowering myself to be in control of my response, rather than punishing myself over what's occurred already.
What you didn't do.
Yeah, because it's like, well, it doesn't do anything. I think it is important to be reflective, but it's not, you can't kind of live in a failure. And I think also it's the way that you see things sometimes. So it's like, sometimes, you know, the point of something being a success is different to different people, right? And I think it's like looking at things and being like, yeah, there could have been extra levels of success with that. You know, there's all of these different things that I could have done, but actually where that was important for me because X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a success that I'm going to own. I'm not going to deny myself of that success just because it didn't get here, because actually this is significant.
And that might have been where you were aiming in the first place. You might not have even set your sights. I always think like that with the benefit of hindsight when you've had a failure and you look back and go, you know, you've got two decisions in front of you. Should I do this? Should I take this employment opportunity or should I not? And then you take it and it all goes wrong. And you know, you might be down the pub with your mates, go, oh, why did you do that? We told you not to do it. But at the time, you had this one bit of information and then you had all of your perspective and you looked at it and you went, with all the information I currently have, that's my best decision. So you threw your lot in and you went and you did it, and then it all comes out in the wash. But if you'd still, with the benefit of hindsight, make exactly the same decision based purely on the information you had available at the same time, why are you beating yourself up? Because you didn't make the wrong decision.
No.
You made the right decision for where you were at that moment. And where you are in that moment is different to where someone else will be. Because we often do that, comparing ourselves to where someone else is. Like, you're looking at your chapter 1 and someone else's chapter 20 or whatever and going, I should be here rather than there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think with decisions, I think I have a natural tendency to overthink things and get decision paralysis. And I really have to force myself beyond it. But how I've kind of helped to do that for myself is be like, there is no wrong decision if you know why you're making the decision. If you decide on something without knowing why you're deciding it, then something goes wrong, then it's a bad decision for me. If you know, like your example, that based on the information at the time, I'm making this decision to do this, and I believe that if I do this, this is going to happen. If that doesn't happen and it goes wrong, at least you know why you made that decision. So at least you can then look back and be like, well, this is where my head was at. This is what I wanted to aspire to, or this is what I wanted to happen, or this is how I wanted to feel. And if I don't feel like that, then at least I've got a point to go back to and be like, do I still want to get to that point where I feel that success or that feeling or that, you know, whatever? You know, then it really helps you. I think if you're jumping into decisions and you never really know why you're doing them, then that's how it's all going wrong, because you've got no kind of North Star in terms of where you're heading or why. So you can't reflect because you don't know why you're doing it in the first place.
So a lot of that's very obviously centered around your decisions. Now, you went on to a role in Audio Technica, is that right? Yeah. And I think that's a management position. So how the transition of being responsible for yourself, but then how do you work with those decisions when other people suddenly affect the status quo of how things are being presented to you? And you know, having worked in different management sort of teams and running businesses now with a group of employees that I've been a part of the decision making to bring into to my daily decision making process. That's always like a challenge personally. Like, you know, when you're not just suddenly considering yourself, you've now got 15, 20 other people to worry about. What was your journey into management like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is difficult, and I think, you know, not to throw any shade, but I think, you know, going back to my Dolphin days, you know, they were kind of young entrepreneurial 20-somethings. You know, I was one of their first hires, and they did a pretty bad job at it, to be honest. You know, I remember, you know, I got a formal warning when I rung in one day to say my child had a temperature of 40 degrees and I needed to take them to hospital, and they said, well, we need you here today. If you're not going to turn up, then you're in trouble, and you need to book days in advance. You know, and it's just like mismanagement. And again, it's not, you know, everyone learns, but I think by the time I ended up at Audio Technica, so I'd done 5 years at TL, I'd then been in music for 5 years, like Akai and Newmark Alesis, sort of moving into more of a managerial role. And then, I mean, that was a fast moving company, so you're already starting to see that your time is kind of less on visiting distributors and talking about products and stuff, and it's much more on well, in the nature of that company, hiring and firing and putting out fires and dealing with situations as they go wrong. I then went to a startup where, you know, as that grew, then it was kind of more and more management positions. But honestly, when I was at the startup position, it was a company called Roly. And we were getting to the stage now where we're starting to get much bigger investments and we're dealing with much more serious investors. And I realized that as a professional, I was lacking because I didn't have that same managerial experience. I was still very much a tech person. You know, I hadn't scaled a company to 100 million before. I hadn't sat on the board of XYZ before.
I mean, let's just put that into perspective. Not many people have scaled a business to 100 million people. You know, it's a fairly reserved list.
Yeah, but I think when you're starting to deal with venture capitalists, especially like from China and from America, they have expectations of what a C-suite looks like or an exec leader team looks like in terms of their, you know, their schooling, their education, their work history, you know, the company name drops that they can name. And it's like all of a sudden then, you know, I'm a inexperienced wild card that, you know, why are you here kind of thing. And it made me think, you know, I think authenticity has always been a really important thing to me. And I always like learning. So I was like, I need to get myself an MBA. Like, I need to do this properly. So I actually went to them and I said, look, I don't want a pay rise this year. As part of the review, I want you to give me every other Friday off and I want you to make up the difference. I've gone out and applied to some places and I've got a scholarship for Warwick University Business School. And yeah, I want you to support me to do my MBA and managed to get them to say yes. So I started like a 2-year exec MBA. The campus was just at the Shard. I used to work in Haggerston. So I was either in Haggerston or I was down London Bridge. And it was one of the best things I ever did. You know, I think when you're young and you're a student, it's an experience. But when you go back to study with people and you're suddenly like, you know, I was like more mid-30s then, you know, you've got money and you're learning and you're with all these cool people from different industries around the world. It's such a different learning experience and some great tutors, and we got to kind of study abroad. So I did, like, I think coming from like the sales side, you always think on the finance side, it's like maths is maths. What's so hard? And I think, so I forced myself to do some of the finance modules. So I did accounting and financial management at Rutgers in New York, and you got a day on Wall Street and at S&P Global, and it was lots of fun. And I realised it's not just numbers is numbers, it's numbers. There's a whole art and a science to kind of accounting management and financial management. And but yeah, we got to kind of do stuff. I got to do a week in Milan to do luxury business management at Bocconi, which was just incredible as well, to kind of understand the luxury industries more, because, you know, it's always fascinated me, I think, you know, way before I got involved with KEF, of how music can position itself as more of a luxury, of kind of an art, you know, like a beautiful instrument or a piece of technology should be seen more than just a device or a component. It's like, how can we position ourselves more? Because I think, you know, there was always a problem for years in MI of kind of this race to the bottom, and people weren't making any money, and like the perceived price point of things was just got to that point of ridiculous. And it's like there needs to be a way to kind of position things differently. But anyway, I think I'd just gone through that and I did a specialism in leadership as my kind of addition to the MBA. And so I graduated from that and I looked back at Roly and I was like, after studying management and leadership, I'm not sure I want to continue to be here. And like, sort of at the same time, I just happened to have been having a conversation with Robert from Audio Technica about potential positions. And it really intrigued me because they were like, you know, we're a pretty big company. We're quite siloed. We've got no sales director. You know, this is the landscape. You know, it's, you know, there's all of these different countries. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing. And like as a cultural leadership challenge, I saw it as something really exciting to do. So it was almost like an extended MBA module. There's almost my approach
So
of
putting
going
some
to
of these theories into
of
practice.
kind of like how to kind of help bring the team together a little bit and how to make it work. So a lot of the stuff that I focused on there was kind of around sort of how to communicate as a team, how to kind of work on a strategy, kind of a shared kind of strategy and vision, restructuring a little bit as well to kind of basically there used to be a pro division and a consumer division, but it didn't really make much sense. So in pro was everything from like MI stuff to commercial install stuff, because it was pro industry, and then consumer was like turntables and some microphones, but not the same ones, and some headphones, but not the same ones, and it was all like a bit confusing. So I was like, look, anything that is sold at retail should be in the same category, because that's the sales cycle, it's the marketing, it's the audience. Anything that's kind of B2B and sold through an installer, an integrator, or a hire company should be commercial, and we'll just make that change now. So we've made that change, which was quite a significant one. But I think
was that done globally?
It wasn't done globally, to be honest. I think with a company like that, it's quite difficult to kind of implement everything globally. But I think definitely from a European perspective, it worked really well. So
I was going to say, how did it go down? How was it received as an idea? Did the people that were already there go like, hang on a minute, this is batshit? Like, because it must have seemed really out of left field considering the way it was built up before.
I think yes and no. I think the thing is that people could recognise where there was challenges. So it's like, actually, that makes sense, you know, to have a bit more focus. And I think there was also, you know, if someone's working on an AV install product, they don't want to have their sales targeted or their reporting in the same cycle and cadence as someone who's working in the retail side of things. And also, if you're on the retail side of things and you're told you can't access this product because it's pro and you're doing this, and it's just frustrating if you've got opportunities. So I think there was a lot of people that were like, oh, this is going to be great. I think you always get some people that are like, you know, a little bit more protective over things. But I think that's natural with anything. I think generally as humans, that's the thing that people struggle with the most, is change. I think, you know, we're all, no matter how impulsive or crazy we think we are, we're creatures of habit. We like, you know, when I commute to work, I know which seat I'm going to sit in. If there's a seat, I know where I'm going to stand. I know which door I'm going to use. I know which side of the stairs I go up and down. I know where I'm going to have my breakfast. Like, everything is like, you don't even mean to do it, but you naturally fall into these habits. And there are little ways in which you can control an uncontrollable world that make you feel more comfortable. And anytime someone or something changes that, there's a road diversion.
Yeah.
You know,
it breaks your pattern and you feel uncomfortable.
You feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think we shouldn't expect people to not feel uncomfortable in a work environment when something changes, because we're all like it. We hate it when something is different to what we expect. Even when we say, oh yeah, I embrace change, you know, it's bullshit. No one does really. So it's about trying to help people understand what's the benefits and be prepared that some people are going to think it's a crap idea. And it's going to, you know, consistency, I think, is important in terms of getting things out. But I think the thing is although we all hate change, change is inevitable. Change is the only constant in the whole world. It's the only thing that's always there is change, right? So we have to get comfortable with it. And any change, especially within a company environment, is part of the evolution. And you know what? If you don't evolve, what happens?
You evaporate.
You die.
Yeah.
So it's you know, do you want to be the dinosaur, or do you want to, you know?
That's one of the things that they say now, sort of like modern working world. If you know, how do you? I don't know if things stay relevant is the right terminology, but like, how do you survive in it? And adaptability is like meant to be the number one skill set. Like, are you adaptable? Can you switch? Can you pivot? Whatever the, you know, phrase is, but can you do that to survive effectively and go, right, I'm doing this today and I'm doing that tomorrow. And there's lots of people that have lots of different jobs and they do that on a day-to-day basis. I think everybody struggles with change. I've always found it a really interesting challenge to chuck yourself into something and go like, oh, this is awful. Like, I am not comfortable. This is not a comfortable place. But out of that, you can blossom into something that you couldn't have done before. So sort of like putting yourself in that little pressure cooker can be really, really good.
Well, it's a very good question. So what's been your most uncomfortable part of your career so far?
Probably joining Kev, to be honest.
Sitting here
right now.
No, you No, if I'm honest, it's probably joining KEF, because, you know,
So just give our listeners a little bit of information about KEF. KEF stands for
Kent Engineering Foundry. So KEF is over 60 years old. We were founded in 1961 in Maidstone in Kent by an ex-BBC engineer called Raymond Cook. And our roots are in hi-fi, basically. But we make premium to luxury consumer audio products. And I think over the years, probably from in music when I looked after Amazon and Apple accounts, and then at Rowley when I was looking after the Apple distribution and John Lewis and Harrods and some of these ones, through to Audio Technica where I was doing more of the consumer stuff, and Fnac. I quite enjoyed the consumer side of things. And so when this opportunity with KEF came up, and, you know, I met Grace Lowe, who's the president of KEF, female boss. I was like, amazing. I just appealed to me. I've always thought, you know, quality products, authentic, beautiful products. It was really interesting for me. But, you know, everyone likes to think that they don't have an ego, but it's like in the MI and Pro Audio, I'd been working there for a good amount of time, and I knew the scene. They knew me. Very comfortable, right? Coming into hi-fi and like sort of the AV custom install, no one knows who the hell I am. So you have to start from scratch. So kind of when you're, you know, there's some retailers, you know, there's some people that you know, but a lot of people it's brand new. So you're kind of right back at the start trying to reestablish who you are, what you're about, what you know, and trying to go through it all again. And that's feel quite uncomfortable when you're sort of a more latter part of your career to have to go through that. And it has a little bit of PTSD as well, because it wasn't easy the first time round, and it's like, oh, I don't want it to be like that again, you know.
And how long have you been here now?
3 years.
Okay, so you've gone through that sort of initial uncomfortable phase. You've established yourself. You've obviously met more new people and expanded your network. And it's interesting just listening to that, how the importance of the network and the people within your day-to-day activity is in comparison to now what you would need sort of technically perhaps, whereas, you know, the early part of our conversation was very technical, very focused on your history and training in technical elements of production, but actually moving that now into sales, marketing, and you're the general manager of KEF. That's correct, isn't it? So, you know, you've got an all-encompassing role which doesn't necessarily feature one thing or another, but being able to have a conversation that is, you know, covers a broad range of topics, whether that be marketing, like we're sitting in an experience centre. I don't doubt that you've had quite a big hand in the concept of developing that and then actually making that a reality, and the management of it, and how do you actually utilise that as a sales tool. You know, there's so many different things in that period of time. What's with the importance of the network, so where do you see yourself going in the future?
I think just to answer the first part in terms of importance of network, I think having a network is important wherever you are. I think people talk a lot about you know, company culture, and then, you know, being a woman of colour in the industry, people talk about diversity. I think actually the most important thing for everybody, no matter who you are, is inclusivity. And I think that's what you feel when you feel like you've got a network of people that you know and they know you. You don't have to prove yourself. It's like you feel like they've got your back, they know you, and you feel included. So I think that's why it's important. But I think actually coming here was brilliant for me as well, because I've always just felt that, you know, audio is audio, and we're all part of this big bubble between kind of the point of creation and the point of consumption. And I think we all kind of separate it into these little parts of the industry, but actually it's all one big audio industry. And it's actually nice to be here as well and help to bring those roads together. And like the experience centre that we're in now, the KEF Music Gallery London, is a perfect combination of, you know, stuff I've learned from MI and Pro Audio and residential AV and commercial AV and Pro Sound, and all of these things kind of mushed together into this experience centre that just feels really slick.
It's a classy place.
But there's a lot going on under the hood.
Yeah, I bet there is. But like, so I'd never been here before, and genuinely, this is how ignorant I was to it. I said to Sam, I was like, "Isn't KEF a German brand?" And he was like, "You absolute dork." No, it's not. But
it does sound a bit like a German word.
Yeah.
It stands. People always like, is it KEF or KEF? So it should technically be KEF because it stands for Kent Engineering Foundry, but it is KEF.
With two Fs.
British brand. No, one F.
One F.
KEF.
Yeah, see,
Yep.
I'm confused again. But the space is amazing. It's amazing outside. It's one of those places that you walk into and you instantly go, this is cool. I'm getting the vibes from it. I feel comfortable. People are lovely. They're very welcoming. And then, like you were saying earlier, people don't like change. If I put myself into a customer's shoes and I walk into this experience center, I don't have any animosity or fear about anything because the way it's made me feel, like it's removed any of that sort of like, oh, I'm in somewhere I don't know, that environment, that change element, that's been removed from the way that I feel when I come in. It's a wicked place.
And in terms of retailing that, my first experience of this brand was like when I was about, 13, 14, going into Richer Sounds in Croydon and looking at the speakers on the shelf and be like, yeah, one day.
They're up on the top shelf for a reason.
Just anywhere in that shop. I was 13. I didn't have any money. So it was like, how much is your cheapest CD player? And, they used to have these Eclipse CD players that were about 30 quid. And I bought one and I thought I was God because I had managed to get 30 quid together. But, that longevity of a brand that's been around since the 60s and established itself as quite a prominent part of commercial audio in the hi-fi world, that's fantastic. But that change of the way that we're now interacting with technology and audio manufacturing, we're in central London, a stone's throw from Oxford Street. This is not a cheap day out to have a room where people can come and just sit and listen to speakers. So there has to be that graduation process where, like you've said, the value perceived by lifestyle and products that are formed around some sort of creative concept are actually given a higher value, that you can retail it from a place in the middle of Oxford Street, which is not going to be an easy thing to do by any standard. Just give us an idea of where you see that journey in terms of audio and how you think things are going to develop over the next few years.
That's a big question, but I think there's an important thing in what you said of kind of where things are going and how does it work. Audio is something that you experience. It's something which is about your senses. So it's kind of like, in terms of where we're going with it, I mean, audio is so important. It kind of governs everything. It's audio that is the main communication driver that we've had since the beginning of time, right? So it's something really special. And I think what has happened a little bit over the years is a kind of commoditization and devaluation of the art behind the audio, to the point where we're in danger of audio being something which is just turned on and turned off like a tap as passive listening in the background. And that's why people can be scared about the advent of new technology and AI, because frankly, then if that's all it is, what's the difference between an AI generated piece of music that's just used on some content to something that someone's been crafting and recording and producing and mastering and putting out there? I think the thing that we need to do is, if audio is still kind of front and central in its importance as a communication tool, as a social barometer of what's happening in the world, as a way in which we can unite over, it's the one universal language is music, right? Yeah. So it's like, how can we bring the value back? Like, I think streaming is amazing that so many people can access so much music and go on a journey of discovery. But also, why are we in a world where I can pay like £10 a month and listen to any track by any artist as many times as I want, or I can pay about £10 a month and listen to one audiobook?
Yeah.
When did music get devalued that much? So I think the job that we have in audio across the whole industry is to put the value back in the art, to make people want to fall in love with listening again and actively participate in it. And I think that started to happen in kind of live sound and gigs. I think COVID really helped with that as well. People realized the importance of connection and being together. But the way that people experience audio, the best way that most people experience it now is in headphones, because most of the time people are used to listening through, really, really easy and accessible, but little monoblock Bluetooth speakers or whatever, or smart devices. And people don't get a chance to actually hear the fidelity and the artistry as the artist intended. They don't get to hear the nuances, the original energy. And I think when we think of it as that, when I speak now, sound waves are leaving my mouth as a movement of air which is being captured, right? But that whole thing is going on a journey now. So this initial energy that's a movement of air is being captured by a moving diaphragm, I guess, turned into a voltage, turned into binary digits, reproduced, and it's going down this whole chain. But it needs to be respected through that whole journey so that when it comes out again, it has the same energy as when I first put it out. And that doesn't really happen with a lot of things. Now, that's what I think we have an opportunity to do with a brand like Kef, is we can get people to listen in a way that, frankly, probably a lot of people don't listen anymore. They haven't heard stuff like that. And you can give people that moment where, you talk about when you're a 13-year-old boy going into richer sounds. I bet there was a moment at some point around then where you listened to something in a way that made the hairs on your arm stand on end and you were like, wow. And that was it.
We often talk about this. And we mentioned that in our very first episode. It's so important. And it is missed. And there's been a handful of moments through the last 20 something years where I can remember that exact experience happen. Hairs on the back of your neck go, what? And you're like, wow. And we talked about going to gigs, closing your eyes, so just
Evelyn Glennie.
Zone out. It was Evelyn Glennie we were talking about as well. Yeah, all of these things that contribute to experience and listening in a way that is, because it's individual and. When we've talked about sound being subjective, and these are all those things that come together. We're going to wrap up very shortly. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for coming on. Any wise words of wisdom to people, specifically women as well, wanting to get into the audio industry? Anything that you can share would be, I'm sure, greatly appreciated.
I don't know if I have any words of wisdom to share, but I think what I would say is just be authentic. And if sound is something that brings you joy, there's so many different ways in which you can have a career or have a meaningful way of making your joy and your passion your career. So don't give up finding a way. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be in a studio or you're going to be a pop star or you're going to be a DJ or whatever. There's so many different roles within this kind of industry, this patchwork, this eccentric patchwork of an industry that we have within audio. I think just kind of be authentic and stick to that passion, find the joy and find a way to make it work. But I think, just keep listening, keep learning.
There we go. Keep listening, keep learning, find your path. And
it's a proper little mantra.
It's great. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Real pleasure. Thank you for allowing us to be here today to film our podcast.
Welcome.
What an amazing day. Yeah, been absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much for joining us. Please like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff, comment. The amazing Sarah Yule here today with us. Kieran, time to say goodbye.
Goodbye. Also, if there's something that you want us to discuss, or there's someone that you want us to discuss something with, or you want to come and get on,
we could discuss
there'll be a
lot
link
of people, mate.
Somewhere, and get in touch, do something funky. It's not scary at all. It's two idiots and some microphones.
It's terrifying.
It's not.
Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.